I just I like that because I'm like really hard on myself in general, but even I never thought of something like that. that is that is funny. Welcome to episode 18 of the CPA Exam Experience podcast from SuperfastCPA. I'm Nate, and in today's interview, you're going to hear me talk with Shaka. She is a CPA exam candidate, SuperfastCPA customer, and now a CPA, a past candidate, I guess you would say. And in this interview, there are three things that I want you to listen for. And again, we cover a lot more than three things. There are all kinds of tips, and what's most useful is hearing her entire CPA study process and all the insights that she got as she went through the process, from struggling in the beginning, as almost everyone does, to then when it all starts to click and then going on into the phase where she just passes section after section. But there are three specific things that she shared that I thought were very good tips individually, or very just specific things. So the first one is she had a little rule for herself anytime that she pulled out her phone throughout the day. So listen for that. The second thing is she talks about switching review courses even before she had passed any sections. And she thought it was because there was some kind of inherent problem with the review course she was using. But what I want you to listen for is the realization she had and how she changed things after that. And then the third thing that you should listen for is she shares one of the funniest things I've ever heard in any arena, not just CPA topic, about how she had this goal reward program for herself, but also a punishment when she failed a section. And I just thought this was so funny because I am someone who thinks in those terms. I'm very hard on myself, but even I would have never really thought of something like that. So it's just very amusing, to say the least. So if you find this episode helpful, or you've listened to any of the previous episodes and you found those helpful, I would ask you to do two things. First, share your favorite episode with someone else who's studying for the CPA exams, because these episodes are free. They are, I think, one of the best resources for CPA candidates online, as far as something that's free, because you just get a lot in terms of motivation, trying to put yourself on the same page as these people who are describing their CPA study experience. And it's just helpful to hear the full story of what someone has been through that you are trying to do yourself. You're trying to accomplish something that these people have, and hearing how it went for them start to finish, including all the, warts and all, so to speak, so that you can identify with yourself, okay, I'm having a rough time, but so were they. And if I just keep putting in the time and effort and the strategies, this will all start to click. And from there, that's when you start passing your exams. And the second thing, of course, would be to just look up the podcast in your favorite podcast app, wherever you listen to these, and leave a review for the podcast. And so in that spirit, I just want to read one or two of our newest reviews. These are from Apple Podcasts specifically, because that's what I use, so I just pull this up. So this is from KFits97. He said, or I guess I don't know if it's a he or she, they said, I've taken 2 of the exams so far and have passed both using SuperfastCPA. Both the course and these podcasts are great. Then another one from Mahmood. Michael's story. He says, this story is really helpful. It gave me energy and motivated me to schedule my exams sooner, and most importantly, to start waking up earlier in the morning. So thank you for those reviews. Again, please take a second if you found these helpful and find the podcast in your podcast app and leave a review. Now, the last thing, if this is the first time you've come across SuperfastCPA, these podcasts are helpful, but they kind of jump all over the place. But you will hear it referenced over and over, our study methods, or the CPA or the SuperfastCPA approach to studying. The best place to go for a free 1-hour training where we will walk through that thing exactly is one of our free study trainings. These are a 1-hour webinar where we will teach you how to have a 2-hour main study session with your review course. It doesn't matter what review course you're using. And you can get more done in these 2 hours than someone who's studying 4 or 5 hours the normal way. And normal way, that's explained on the training, the mistakes or the problems with the normal way of studying, which most people are using. And then how you can just make a few small tweaks, but get insanely better results from 2 hours instead of like 4 hours. So the big claim is that on weekdays when you're working, that is all you need, is 1 2-hour session done with your review materials, and that's all the time you need to find or set aside to study with your review course on weekdays. So you can go to superfastcpa.com/passnow, or just text pass now, one word, to 44222 to get a link to one of these upcoming trainings. So with that, let's get into this interview with Shaka. Once you got to that point, how did you kind of start the CPA study process? Did you just get a review course and just kind of jump into it, or how did it all start for you?
So I was actually a campus representative for Rogers CPA review. So I was able
Nice.
to claim that course basically anytime I was ready to start. But after graduation, I actually had an internship. So I wasn't able to, well, I could have started studying right away, but I didn't use that opportunity. But after the internship, I actually had a gap of like 15 months. But after my internship, I had like a vacation plan to go back to the Philippines. So I was in the Philippines for 3 months and I tried to study there, but it was really difficult. Just like having that almost 2 month gap between graduation and the time I tried to start studying again was a little difficult. I tried to study for FAR and that didn't go so well. So I moved on and tried to study for reg instead. So I was studying for reg for about, I want to say 2 or 3 months. But for some reason, it just like things weren't going the way I planned. And I figured that it would be easier for me to just maybe I'll just get a part-time job while studying, which I actually would suggest for most people because not a lot of people can sit down and study for 8 hours straight. Some people can, like
I
they're able
agree.
to, but
Yeah.
a lot of people say, or there are a lot of studies that show that if you study just for 4 intense hours a day, it's much more effective than doing it all in within an 8 hour window.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did. I had a part time job at elementary school. I think I was working about 30 hours a week, and then it was from 12 to 6. So I would just study in the morning and the evening. And I think that really helped me. So I was using Roger at the time and I actually found SuperfastCPA. I think I found it on a Reddit forum.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I feel like for most people studying for the CPA exam, you're just like looking for motivation or people who
Yeah.
have been through or are going through what you're going through. Just look it up and you'll probably find something on Reddit or there's this forum called Another 71. But yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
found it on Reddit and I wish when I found it, I was like, wow, I wish I found this sooner because there are some review courses that have apps, but there aren't any that have like those mini quizzes that Superfast has,
Yeah.
like the 5 questions. And sometimes that's
Mm-hmm.
really all you need or all you have time for during like
Right.
a 15-minute break. So I think that was really helpful for me because wherever you are, like what I tried to do is every time I pulled out my phone, I would have to do 5 questions before I like look at my email or go on social media or anything. So that
Mm.
really helps.
That's a
Yeah.
good
And
that's a good tip. I'm gonna start
yeah,
saying that to people.
because it helps it keeps you focused on your goal because like out of habit you look at your phone and keep scrolling through social media
Yep.
but you could like rewire your brain somehow and it helps just keep you focused and be responsible throughout the day even when you're not looking at the review course or watching the lecture. At least you have that app.
Nice.
um
So did you actually take any sections and fail, or like what was the kind of how did that go?
yeah, so I first took reg. And then before I even got the results for reg, I moved on to audit because at that time in 2018, there was actually like a 1 month gap between the time that you took the test and that they would release the score. So I didn't want
Yeah,
to
it
waste
was
any time
longer.
at that point.
Hmm.
So I just moved on and studied for audit. I took the chance hoping I passed reg, but I failed both parts, unfortunately. And it was rough. I like was expecting to pass at least one, but I think it's better it probably was better that way because then I pushed myself. I knew that like even though I was studying really hard, I probably needed a better study method. So I just switched it up instead of like watching all the lectures. Most people said just go straight to the multiple choice, and that's why Superfast is really helpful because then you have the multiple choice questions on your phone ready whenever you
Hmm.
need it. And then and also the voice lectures
The
or audio
audios.
lectures.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would play that in my car even though it's just like a 15-minute drive going to work or anything. I would just play that And even though you're not absorbing everything, you at least learned a thing or two every time you listen to an
Right.
audio lecture. But yeah, I think those are really helpful. And then whenever I was like at home and I had like a longer time to study, then that's when I'll do like the longer 25 to 50 questions or the sims.
Hmm.
So that was kind of my study method. Just wherever you are, you should have it on your mind or something playing in the background that's like keeping you focused so that you don't take like I think that when you're taking the CPA or when you're studying for the CPA exam, you can't really take more than a few days break. If you are taking it seriously, it's hard to take even a day off because your mind's always on it.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's kind of it's kind of miserable anyways. And so it's almost
Yeah.
easier to just accept that I'm just not even going to take days off and I'm not even
Yeah.
going to take hours off, kind of like, because I was always trying to study from my phone, and I had stuff that was not ideal for on my phone. I had like Word documents that I was trying to like pinch and zoom, and that was kind of that's why we made the study tools the way they are. Just this should all work right inside of an app that's just super fast, that's super quick to pull out and start using, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah. How about your main study sessions? Like when you were studying in the beginning, when you sat down with you, what'd you use? Roger, you said?
Initially, yes, I used Roger and actually ended up using a combination of Roger and Becker
Oh,
just
nice.
because Roger wasn't. Well, initially I thought that it wasn't working for me just because I failed both reg and audit,
Yeah,
but in the end it was a study method. All I had to do was just keep like
for
hammering down the
sure.
questions, which I wasn't doing enough the first time around.
Okay, so that's what I'm basically asking. So yeah, when you actually sat down with your main review course in the beginning stages, when you were, ended up failing those sections, what were you
Mm-hmm.
doing then, and then how did you change it? What are kind of the things you figured out for your main study sessions?
So when I first started studying, so the very first time when I actually started studying for FAR, that was going to be my first attempt. I was reading the book and actually going through it and highlighting it because I don't know, I thought it would be an effective way to study because they give you the
Yeah.
books and you expect to read through the whole thing, but that was probably like the worst advice I could ever give to anybody unless you thrive in that type of learning environment.
Hmm.
Then I definitely would not suggest doing that. If anything, I would suggest you could watch the lectures, but I would suggest watching it in 1.5 or 2 times speed because some of them go really slow and then you just lose your focus really quick,
Yeah.
especially when the topics are really dry. So that's what I did during my first attempt. I just watched the video lectures and then would do the multiple choice right after. And I did all the questions, but I don't think I did the questions more than twice, which was probably a mistake because I wouldn't even do it like back to back days. I would take breaks every now and then,
Hmm.
and that's not very effective. So the second time around, the advice I got from most of my friends who have passed in their first or second try, they said that they just went through all the multiple choice questions. Like they wouldn't even look at the lecture unless they were completely lost. And when they would watch it, like I said, you would have to play it in a faster speed to keep
Yeah.
you interested for that long. But yeah, I think multiple choice, just drilling those down, even if you feel like sometimes you're memorizing it, after a few times, if you read the explanation, it'll click. Like
Yes.
it'll make sense to you eventually. And once you do enough of the multiple choice that everything makes sense, or most things make sense, not everything will make sense. Like your first few times.
Right.
Once you do it enough times and you do the sims, like it will make sense.
Yeah. That's a great, yeah, that is how it works. It feels like your first few weeks or your first few times through kind of a topic that she's like, I just don't even understand what this is saying. But it's just spending enough time working through the questions. Just like you said, it just starts to click.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah. And then how about what was your process for the Sims? Did you do a bunch of practice Sims? Were you kind of writing your own flashcards for journal entries, or how did you kind of prepare for the simulations?
So for the sims, I think the first few tests I actually did a lot of the practice sims. But as I started retaking the test, I realized that like doing like redoing multiple choice questions helped me more in the Sims than actually doing Sims, because
Yeah.
the more you learn about that concept, the more it starts to make sense. And then the Sims, like instead of just like sometimes people find that we're guessing through the Sims, it'll make more sense when you remember like, oh, this is what I learned from that one multiple choice questions that applies to this Sim.
Hmm.
So that's what I did. So I actually took audit 3 times, and for my last attempt that I finally passed, I actually barely did any Sims until the last week. So when I mastered, or when I felt like I was at a confident level with the multiple choice questions, that's the only time that I moved on to the Sims. So I think I did Sims for 4 or 5 days straight, and then I did like a mock test. So
Nice.
it also depends on the part. So like for FAR, you will need to do more Sims, definitely,
Right.
because then you'll need to keep track of like all the tables and the journal entries. But for audit, where it's more conceptual,
Yeah.
then that you'll probably need to focus more on the multiple choice questions.
Yeah. The reg sims and the far sims are nasty.
Yeah,
Hard to prepare for, but
definitely.
much worse than the other two. And what was your system of taking notes or writing your own flashcards, or what was your way of doing your own notes if you did that?
So for my first attempt, I actually did not write as that many flashcards. I ended up, while watching the lectures, I would take notes and then I would just read through my notes.
Hmm.
But and then I told myself that in the end, like 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the test, I would like write summary pages. But since I was going through every single lecture, I found that I didn't have time to even make a summary for
Yeah.
myself at the end. So during the second time around, I focused on making flashcards. So I would watch a few lectures on the topics that I felt like I was weak in and make flashcards based off those. But most of my flashcards were actually from the explanations on the multiple choice questions. Because on the test, or on the lectures, probably only 60 to 70% of the content is actually going to be in the multiple choice questions. The rest is just more explanations that you might not even remember later. So I
Yeah.
think it's more
I would
effective
say
to
almost
read.
even less, but yes,
Yeah.
I fully agree. Yeah.
And same with the book. It's just so many additional information that you may not even need. So what I would suggest is just reading more of the multiple choice explanations, writing those down, just like key points. You don't have to write the full explanation, just like 5 to 10 words at most that can fit
Hmm.
in one line for the questions that you feel like you are still weak on, and then just drill those down, keep reading them wherever you are, like waiting in line for food or something, just bring those flashcards out. Like for my last audit attempt, there was only one test that I took while working full time when I started at a public accounting firm, and that was probably it was really hard to find time to while working full time, because in my prior job I only worked 30 hours, and then at the new one I had 50 hours plus like a 2 hour commute. So everywhere I was, on the bus, at the gym, like on the lunch break at work, I had my flashcards, and I made sure I was reading those. Flashcards are really helpful.
Yes, and the way you explained it is the best way, I think, is you want to, just in general, again, you can watch the lecture or read the chapter and they present everything. And it's kind of in a different context than when it shows up in the form of an actual question. And so when you are going to make notes or a flashcard for something, you want to be basing it off of kind of the language of the questions, not
Mm-hmm.
just kind of the bullet point summaries of the text or the video lecture. So yeah, exactly what you said. And the flashcards or your notes would be much more helpful that way.
Yeah.
Let's see. So we went through. Oh, what about your version of a final review? Like, what did you do in the last 2 or 3 days before an actual test?
So, well, for like the week, 1 week before, I would take a mock test, at least one mock test. But for the first or the last 3 days, I think that would depend on the person, because for me, I would take another mock test. And even if I got like a
Okay.
60, it wouldn't scare me, because I know
Mm-hmm.
like if you look up, like let's say for Becker mock tests, you look up the average, people who get a 60 on the mock test actually end up still getting an 80 on the test. But for some people, they let that score get to them, like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I'm not ready. So it really depends on you. Just try not to like or freak yourself out when you see your score. Just be ready to see something below the passing score. So yeah, I would do that, take a mock test, review the questions that I got wrong. And even though it's like the last 3 days, I would still take notes of the questions that I got wrong. Because anything that you write down, you're gonna remember like at least 50% of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it helps to take notes, continuously take notes. For so at that point within the last week, you should already have like all your flashcards and like summary pages of notes if you do that. But for the last 3 days, if you feel like there's some things you are still having trouble remembering or understanding, I would suggest writing them down. Just like the main points, not your whole summary page again, just the parts that you're struggling with. And I think, yeah, that would be helpful. And some people suggest just not studying at all on the last day. But for me, I could never do that. I was probably reading my flashcards up until I entered the testing room.
Yeah, exactly. That was the same as me. I just crammed around the clock. Like those last 2 days
Yeah.
that was the only time where I studied probably 10 or 12 hours a day. And then the morning of, it was all about my own flashcards. And another
Yeah.
thing you just mentioned is a huge tip. And we've covered this on multiple ones of these interviews because it's kind of interesting. These people I'm talking to that have, figured out how to pass, they kind of all in general they've figured out some of like the same kind of key ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of them is you don't want to just take notes on everything kind of
Yeah.
mindlessly, like basically rewriting your own summaries. You want to specifically write down the things that you personally struggle to understand or remember, which is basically just what you said. And that makes sense, but a lot of people starting out, they spend tons of time. Well, almost like you said, your first attempt, you spent a lot of time like highlighting, just general
Yeah.
stuff in the text, and it doesn't really translate or do anything. But writing down things that you specifically struggle with, that's what you want to spend time writing down because that's your personal weak area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. And then what about do you remember the day you got your fourth passing score? Like what was that like for you?
Oh yeah. So that day, usually I look at my score at midnight or 5 a.m., but that day, because since it was my last test and I knew I was going to work, I didn't want to open it right away because if I like failed again, it would have been like the worst day of my life. And so I didn't look at it until the end of the day. And I was actually at work and there were only two other people there. It was me, my career advisor, and my other coworker. And I couldn't like scream or jump or anything. So I should have opened it at home, but I finally passed and it was just like a huge weight off my chest. And like
Yeah.
like they've been through the process. So they were really happy for me too, because they probably had like flashbacks of when they look at the results of their
Yeah.
last test. So yeah, it was a great
That's
feeling.
yeah. And that's exactly what you describe. It's just the biggest relief in the world.
Yeah.
Because it's just this thing that's just been hanging over your head every day for months. And yeah, that was a great day for sure. So one thing I've been asking everyone is, so looking back, what do you think the top maybe one or two things that were just the biggest difference makers for you that you would tell other people that are currently in the study process?
So the first thing, if we're being specific on the study technique, I would definitely say just drill down multiple choice questions. One of my friends, he passed the first time on all four tries, and all he did was multiple choice questions, barely watched any lectures. And he only studied 4 hours a day. So
Yeah,
4 hours a day is really all you need. If you have a full-time job, you have no excuse. If you really want to be a CPA, you're going to make time to study for the test.
right.
And and some people, like, they get really caught up on the day-to-day responsibilities of going to work and studying, and they kind of lose focus. So I think it's important to zoom out and think about what you really want. So if a year from now you want to be a CPA, then just keep focusing on that, because that's going to make you want to put in the 4 hours every day. And if you
Mm-hmm.
put in the 4 hours every day, not even like a year from now, even 2 months from now, you're going to be a little less miserable.
Yeah,
So
for
that's
sure.
something that people should focus on, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of tell people that in emails a lot. Like, listen, you're just as miserable. Like, if you have any sections that aren't passed, meaning you're still working on this in any form, you're just as miserable if you study 2 hours a day or like 4 hours a day or 5 hours a day. But you'll get done, and your odds of passing are way, way higher if you
Yeah.
just make it 4 or 5 hours a day. So you might as well. Yeah. And you made me think of a question. I should have asked this to, I haven't been asking this. So looking back, you tried to hit 4 hours a day with your main review materials. Is that kind of what you were aiming for each day?
Yeah. So it would be 4 hours of like mainly multiple choice questions for my main review course. And then
Hmm.
that doesn't include the time that I put in throughout the day, like doing the super fast questions or listening
That's
to
what
the
I was
audio
get.
lectures.
That's what I'm getting at. So
Mhm.
how much more time do you estimate you fit in each day? Like another hour or two?
I would say, yeah, about an hour. And for those 4 hours, so I actually started my own like timesheet, and it would be 4 productive hours. So for those people who are already in the public accounting world, they know that like a concept of billable hours. So you
Yeah.
can't bill the time that you're like looking at your phone or looking something up on Google that's not CPA related. So what I would do a timer start and timer end every time I take my eyes off the screen, or even every time my mind wanders off for more than like 5 minutes, because you can't count that as 4 hours of study time.
Yeah. I mean,
So it really helps.
that's a very strict definition, but I mean, that's kind of how you have to get, really.
Yeah. Well, for those with limited time, then I think the timer does help, because it helps you it yeah, it helps you track how much time you really spent on it. And I wanted for I think it was for FAR, I was really strict on myself about that, because I had exactly 6 weeks to study.
Hmm.
And I wanted to track the amount of time that I spent studying, and I think it was about between 96 to 100 hours for FAR.
And then again, I think you said this, but you were working full time. So to fit in those 4 productive hours, which probably meant more like 5 hours that you were actually sitting there, how
Yeah.
did you were doing it before and after work, or how were you fitting that in, that dedicated study time with your review course each day?
So when I started working full time, it was in the beginning I was able to do 4 hours, but when I started hitting like 50 to 60 hour weeks, it would go down to like 2.5 to 3 hours, which is still a really good amount.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
what
when
I
I
tell
was
people
able,
to aim for. Yeah. Okay.
like 2 to 3 hours, yeah.
Hmm.
But when I did the 4 hours, yeah, I would try to do at least an hour in the morning, like before going to work or anything. And I would actually, my commute was an hour long, and I would be on the bus for 30 minutes. So it was 30 minutes on the bus. I had to make sure that I was either like listening to an audio lecture or reading my flashcards. I would try to focus on the flashcards on the bus, because it's kind of hard to do anything else on there.
Yeah.
Then during my lunch break, I would count that time to like 15 to 30 minutes of reading my flashcards, and then another 2 hours at night.
Nice. Yeah. Well, that's what it takes. So
Oh, there was one more tip that I wanted to give to those who are still taking it.
go for it. Yeah.
So I think one important thing to do is to talk about it. So like with your friends and your family, because that keeps you accountable. And
Yeah.
like they know that if they know that you're taking it, the next time that you see them or the next time that you talk to them, they're gonna be like, "Oh, how's it going? Like, did you pass the part?" And I mean, for me, it wasn't that hard to admit that I failed, but I know for some people, it's kind of like a hit on their ego,
For sure.
right?
There
Yeah.
was, oh
So,
yeah. I have specific people in mind that, yeah.
like, they just didn't want to admit that they failed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People at
And
work that were like the smart kids in the masters, but they were like failing, you know, kept failing sections, and they did not want to talk about it like at all.
I
And,
think
you know,
it's a it's a huge reality check for some people, because those who like didn't get a single A in college, you find them passing, and like doing better than those who do have their masters or were in honors courses. So it really shows, it kind of shows you what the real world is going to be like, because if you put in the work, you're going to see the results. But
It's true.
if
Yep.
you're just like naturally smart and you put in an hour a day, you're not going to pass. So yeah.
It's a great
Yeah, I
point.
said talk about it and set goals. Either so for each part or for all four parts, um, I suggest like giving yourself a reward. Or for me, it was actually a consequence. I wouldn't suggest this. So for me, I didn't expect to fail as much as I did. So I had like a bet with myself that every time I failed, I would cut 2 inches off my hair so that like it was short enough,
Oh
I
my
wouldn't want to go
gosh.
out and I would just be at home studying. And at one point, I think I probably cut like 6 inches off within the first 6 to 8 months. So when people would see me, they're like, "Oh no!" Like I didn't even have to tell them
That
because they
is
knew that I had that like
that is
condition or
funny.
consequence for me. But yeah, and then
That's
but sorry, what were you gonna say?
I just I like that because I'm like really hard on myself in general, but even I never thought of something like that. that is that is funny.
Yes.
Especially for a girl cutting off your own hair. Oh my gosh. Like for me it
Yeah.
would be forcing myself to not get a haircut cuz I cannot stand. Ugh. But I get it. That is hilarious.
Yeah, and my brother would just like start teasing me and say that I'd be bald by the end by the end of all this. But thankfully
Oh
I
man.
it only ended up being up to like my neck, so still had some left. But yeah, for most other people, rewards motivate them and not
Mhm.
consequences. So I would suggest maybe like planning a trip. So let's say like you're gonna take your last part in July, you want to give yourself some leeway and maybe plan the trip in like September. You have to retake some parts, and I think that'll motivate you because and once you book your ticket, you're not gonna want to go on it if you still have to like study while you're on the trip.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever saw this, but I have this little like motivation guide that comes with any bundle that is that exact idea where
Oh,
you plan out a big reward and then after each section you kind of buy one piece of it and you put it. So
oh,
like for me it was golf clubs, new golf clubs.
oh, yeah.
So first I bought like a new golf bag after I passed the first section and I set it in my study room. And so I had to like look at this brand new golf bag, you know, with the tags on it. And that just drove me crazy to like see that thing. And then the next section I bought like the irons. And then on my last section bought like the new driver and then it was like complete, you know. But
Oh, that's a
yeah,
good
that
idea.
worked insanely well. I mean, you basically just described that idea. But yeah, if it's like a trip after one section you I don't know, plan where it is and like put a picture of that place. Second
Yeah.
section, you might buy like a new swimming suit for the trip or whatever. But yeah, I I really like that's gonna make me laugh for a long time. Cutting off
Oh,
your own
the
hair.
consequence.
That
Yeah,
is
at first
so
I like
funny.
started to regret it when I had to cut like 6 inches off, but then eventually it actually kind of motivated me because every day I would
I
think
bet.
about not wanting to cut another 6 inches off.
Yeah. That's I'm gonna have to steal that one. Start telling that to people. That is so funny. All right. Well, yeah, that's basically everything I had. But yeah,
Good.
I appreciate you doing it, and I'm glad you know you used our tools and thought they were useful somewhat. So
Yeah, thank
yeah,
you. Thanks for having me. This was fun. I haven't talked about my CPA experience in a while, but always brings back mostly good memories.
yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All
It was
right.
nice meeting
Have a
you.
good one. Yeah, you too.
You
See
too.
ya. So that was the interview with Shaka. Again, like all the other interviews, if you watched or listened to this point, meaning you heard the whole thing, I think you'll have to agree that was very, very helpful. She shared a lot of good tips, a lot of just singular insights that can apply to a lot of areas in the CPA study process. And so, again, the three things that she covered, the first one was she had this little rule for herself where she would take a quiz or read a few pages in the review notes every time she pulled out her phone instead of going through straight to social media or texting or whatever it was she pulled out her phone to do. She held herself to that. And that's one of the things I'm constantly talking about. If you will just do that, we look at our phones literally hundreds of times a day. And if you even replaced half of that or 25% of those instances and forced yourself to read 5 pages in the review notes or take a quiz, that adds up to a lot of extra practice and exposure. And that's why the idea of mini sessions with our CPA study tools on your phone is so powerful and why it makes such a big difference. The second thing she talked about was how she switched review courses because she thought there was some issue with the first review course that she had when she failed the first 2 sections. And then, of course, a few months later, once she had kind of figured out the study process, she realized, it's really not about the review course. And that's something that a lot of people think about, or they kind of assume that there's got to be one review course that just has something that makes this whole process easier compared to the others. And that's not true. Any of the big main review courses you can use to pass your exams. It comes down to your strategies. And that is why we have an entire course on the study approach, the daily study process. That's why we talk constantly about it, is because everyone has a review course and everyone's kind of doing the same thing. They try to watch the lecture, read the chapter, and then do practice questions. And the fail rates are 50% across the board. So it's obvious that it's not about the review course itself. It's how you study, how you use those materials. And it's not as simple as just watching the video and then doing the questions. There are a ton of little strategies within the strategy of how to do each part of that much more effectively. So again, that's what we talk about on those free study trainings. The third thing that she talked about was, of course, her consequence of getting a haircut, I guess, cutting an inch or 2 off of her hair whenever she failed a section. That is, take that for what it's worth. I don't think a lot of people out there are going to take that strategy on, but the general idea is sound. To have some type of thing, and again, I mentioned it when she brought that up, the review or the reward model where you split your 4 sections into a big goal that you want or a big reward for yourself. My example was golf clubs. And then you buy kind of a symbolic piece or section of that reward each time you pass a section. And you put it in the room where you study, in its packaging. You can't open it. You have the tags on it. Whatever it is, you split your reward into 4 pieces. And the general idea is something like that. So you have this almost like a physical representation of getting a fourth of the way to your goal each time that you pass a section. So I hope you found this interview helpful. Again, if you're new to this podcast, go back, listen to some of the other interviews we've done. I think you'll find all of them really helpful. And again, if you want to see a walkthrough of how we teach our clients and customers to study or approach their main study session, regardless of what review course you're using, go to superfastcpa.com/passnow, or just find the link below in the description, or you can easily find a link just going to our site, superfastcpa.com. So thanks for listening or watching, and I will see you on the next episode.